All right, so episode introduction here. Little intro music. What?
Shit, hold on. I feel like I have to sneeze.
Well, do it. Fucking do it, bro. Fucking sneeze, bro.
It won't come out. All right, let's just...
All right, we'll just sneeze away from the mic if you have to.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I could always cut your sound for it.
Okay, all right.
You're like, hello, my name's Hayley. Yeah.
Just fuck up the...
Yeah. All right.
Whatever, I'm only human. Whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so episode intro here, a little jingled. All right. Hello, welcome to the podcast. This is the first episode of The Films I Wish I Made. My name is Ryan Rachall. You can find me on the socials at Ryan Rachall. That's Rachall. Or you can also go to at Daakins Productions. That's Daakins. And I am a filmmaker. And with me here is...
I'm Hayley Devlin. I am a news producer currently. On social media, you can find me at Spooky Kooky Hayley. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and that is Kooky with a K. Hayley, Hayley.
Awesome. So today we are going to be talking about Night of the Living Dead, the 1990 remake. That's one of the films that I wish I made. It's a film that had a tremendous impact on me, so that's why I chose it for this episode. Those of you who don't know, there was an original Night of the Living Dead that was made in '68, which is also a favorite film of mine, but the remake has a special place in my heart, starring Tony Todd, the one true Candyman, and of course Patricia Tallman, who you may recognize from nothing else because she's a stunt woman and she pretty much has no other roles starring in any other movies. Apparently, she was the possessed witch in Army of Darkness, so that's cool.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's weird because she does really well in this film, and honestly, she's stunning, and it's you would think
she's gorgeous.
I mean, maybe it was a personal choice. Maybe she didn't want to act more. Maybe she is really good at stunts.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. She has a pretty nice IMDb, but it's clear that most of her roles, she's either a stunt performer or she has a role that she got because she's got to do stunts. Like that's pretty much what her career revolves around, which I never really knew that until this last viewing of the film. And I really took note of how, she's actually really doing her own stunts. And like, I never thought about it before, but yeah, I mean, she's running barefoot and with like, pretty sure no knee pads and just taking spills left and right.
That's true. Yeah. Now that you point that out. Yeah.
You just take it for granted. It's shot so well. So yeah. And then also Tom Towles is also one of the supporting cast who no longer with us. He passed in 2015, but he's a very good villain if you needed one for this kind of film, even though we already have zombies surrounding us. So I guess let's get into it. I mean, we can summarize the film really quick just so it's fresh in everyone's head if you haven't seen it in a while. But spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, why are you listening to this podcast?
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, don't do that.
Like, you're not going to enjoy it.
Hey everyone, if you haven't seen
Night of the Living Dead 1990,
make sure you go check out the official release. These are great films that everyone should see. Frankly, if you haven't, you're really missing out. So go watch the movie and then come back to the films I wish I made.
Or the curse of spoilers will befall you for 100 years.
I recommend in this case you go watch both the 68 and the 90 version and then come back to the podcast, because this is not a podcast that's going to be a review. We're going to be analyzing the film and talking about what we love about it, and also maybe some changes we would make. Also, I forgot to mention, this one is directed by Tom Savini, and most people know him as an effects makeup person.
Yeah.
But this is like his directorial debut, and George A. Romero couldn't do it because he was contractually obligated to do something else at that time. So even though he was heavily involved, he was a producer and he was on set a lot. I still kind of think it's Romero's vision, and you have the original producers there making sure that kind of Savini stayed in line with what they wanted to do with their property for the second time around. So
Yeah.
that being said, I mean, I think Tom Savini's still awesome filmmaker in his own right. He's got a couple other films since that I really enjoy.
He is, but what an interesting position to be in. Like, how many other movies, does that really happen with? And that's what, when this film originally came out, a lot of critics had that complaint. They were like, this is just the exact same movie remade twice. Not so much of a remake, but interesting to think about.
And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I think it's very different. And if you're not watching them closely enough, maybe you don't realize that. But I guess we'll get
Yeah.
into all of that. But so let's summarize the film really quick for people who haven't seen it in a while. So we open on a nice, bright, sunny day with two siblings arguing in a car ride, headed to visit their mother in the cemetery. The best place to start any zombie movie, right? It's 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 not a very complicated plot. The thing I like about Romero is he doesn't get into why things are happening too much. He maybe delves into people kind of guessing or trying to find answers, but he never really gives you a definitive reason. So ultimately, what you have is Barbara, after escaping from the cemetery, winding up at a house, ends up meeting Ben, who is also sort of our co-lead character, and they end up finding another group of people who have already been in the house, and they're sort of forced to make the best of a bad situation with this random group of people as the onslaught of the undead sort of winds up around them and focuses on humanity as Romero likes to do. He doesn't focus so much on the zombies or their lack of humanity.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, he really focuses on how human beings handle themselves in these kinds of situations. And the situation could be really any kind of catastrophe. Really what the film is about at its heart is how will these people deal with death, imminent death, the threat of imminent death all around them? Will they be able to work together? Will they be able to rise above their differences, solve the problems that they need
Hmm.
to solve? Or will, they destroy each other because of their bickering and their selfishness and, their opinions and all those sort of politics that get in the way of being a cohesive group, especially in our contemporary society. Uh, which you could say rings truer today more than any other time in America.
Yeah. No, I definitely think it was interesting going back and watching that film with everything that's been happening. Um, and just looking at the different factions that form and how some of the characters have trouble seeing the humanity in the other characters and how they put themselves above the fact that they're a human being too. It's just the selfishness in this movie I think is really interesting to watch.
It definitely plays out in a way that you kind of kicking yourself because you're like you guys could work together, you guys could be helping each other. There's a lot of things that could be getting done in this situation
Right.
if you guys would just put the pettiness aside and figure out the best way for everyone to survive. And there are scenes where people really say it. They say it out loud. I mean, when Ben meets Cooper, he literally says, "I've only known you for about 5 minutes, but I could tell I don't like you. So stay the hell out of my way."
Yeah.
And that's just not the right attitude to have. Even though that guy is a dick, like that's not the right attitude to have in this situation. you
No.
know, you gotta maybe get people on the same page.
Cooper's a dick. Like,
Yeah, Cooper is a dick.
undeniably.
But to be fair, Cooper has a sick daughter. And, I think that's where his head is at, even though he's a dick about it. I guess uh, before we jump too far ahead, I mean, feel like that's the best I can summarize the film without doing a scene by scene description.
Yeah.
But so before we get into the film further, I guess I want to just talk about my personal experiences with it. Um, the first time I saw it, I think I was maybe 7, 8, couldn't have been older than 9. We had cable, we had all the movie channels,
Right.
so I would watch a lot of movies that I shouldn't have been at that age.
Same.
Yeah, I saw all the horror movies. Some of them were edited on like certain channels, like the nudity was kind of downplayed, but it's still a lot of gore though.
Yeah.
So, and then some like the cursing was like minimized, but like people would still get decapitated, which I found interesting.
Yeah.
I definitely saw this on cable originally. This is one of the ones where I don't think it was edited though.
That's exactly how I originally saw it, and I must have been about the exact same age. I had to be like about 7 years old, and I don't know if it was HBO, I don't know what channel it was on, but somebody had bought the film and they would air it a lot. And I had seen it multiple times at a very young age. I'd turn on the TV, I'd catch it in the middle, maybe towards the end. But I'd seen it so many different times and always started at a different point. And
Yeah,
this was my first time going back and rewatching it as an adult, actually, for the podcast. And there were so many things that I was like, oh, I remember that. I remember that. And it was just interesting, the things that stuck with me and then the parts I forgot.
right, right. And this was my first time ever seeing it in HD, actually, which it still stands up. I think the remaster was really good. I bought a Blu-ray copy specifically for the podcast. I already own it on DVD, but if I was gonna rewatch it, I've already seen it so many times. I thought I've been wanting to upgrade to a Blu-ray for the longest time. This is the perfect excuse. But I've already seen the movie. It's so many times, like somewhere between 20 to 30 times. This is the film that, especially once I owned it, people would come over and I'd be like, "You haven't seen Night of the Living Dead?" And I would just put it on, and I'm like, "That's what we're doing now. We're watching this movie."
Right.
That's you. It's your fault because you haven't seen it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a quintessential zombie film.
Yeah,
And if you like zombie films, if you like horror, you should see this movie.
which I do. I'm obsessed with zombie films. I'm definitely this is probably the first zombie film I think I ever saw. This is the one that got me obsessed with it. And I think after this, I saw Return of the Living Dead, not
Yes.
realizing that it wasn't an official sequel at the time
Yes.
because I was so young. But I was like, this took a left turn.
Yeah. And we could save that for another podcast, but Return of the Living Dead is one of my absolute favorite zombie movies. And I think it's really interesting that Russo and Romero came together and they made the original. And then they split off, and we get these two different worlds of zombies. Ones where they
Yeah.
don't take themselves as seriously, but the gore and the fear is still there. And I really love
Yeah.
Russo zombie movies. But then Romero takes more this sociological path on his zombie movies that are really more of a character study of humanity,
Definitely.
that are
Definitely.
just quite a bit deeper. And they're both really great in their own right. But the fact that it all started with those two minds just coming together.
Yeah.
And I like watching the movie and seeing the different parts of them both in there.
Oh yeah, when they're together, I think you have a solid film. I don't know if you go too far in one direction and you're running a gamble for sure.
Yeah.
Um, because you can get too campy, or you can get too cerebral with something that arguably isn't that cerebral to begin with. How far can you explore humanity in a crisis? Because that's maybe not the best time to explore humanity. One could argue. But yeah, I guess the one of the biggest influences that this film had on me is that this idea that like big things can happen in small settings with small groups of people. Like you can take a handful of people, put them in a room, and then just end their world. I mean, growing up, I watched big films like Terminator 2 on Laserdisc, and that's a film where everything's blowing up and you've got Gatling guns and explosions. And so that was a lot of the movies early on that I had seen, big 80s testosterone action movies.
Yeah.
And I loved them. And Bruce Lee films as well, Jackie Chan films, big, complicated, intricate fight choreography.
Hmm.
You basically need a lot of money to make those kinds of films.
Oh, definitely.
Especially to make those kinds of films safely.
Yeah.
This is one of the first films that I saw that I really liked that was not a big budget film that kept me on the edge of my seat as a child,
Mhm.
throughout the entire thing. And it's really not big. It's not, there is a explosion, but it's so late in the film, you don't care if that happens. It's just icing on the cake, really. It's you're so committed to seeing what happens with these characters and how they work together. And so that's kind of the biggest influence it had on me, is that, wow, you can take big ideas and put them in these small settings and still make a captivating film.
Yeah. I read on IMDb that Tom Savini said that only 40% of his ideas made it into the film.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was an interesting tidbit. And the fact that he wanted it to be a lot gorier than what producers actually greenlit in the final cut.
Well, I think the MPAA is what really got in their way,
Probably.
because I saw some of the behind the scenes I'd seen before on the DVD. I rewatched it for the podcast. And then I did listen to the commentary, which I told you was sucked, because Tom Savini, all he talks about are the effects for the entire movie. He doesn't talk about anything else but the effects. And so I get that. That's your bread and butter, but like, you directed the movie, man.
Yeah.
Like, but I think ultimately, yeah, it was very much the producer's movie, because they owned it. They wanted to remake it to reestablish their copyright, which for the original, which ultimately didn't work in their favor. But they've wanted to make money off of something they lost the rights to
Right.
so many years ago. So it's one of those things where, people always have this idea of like, oh, the producers are messing with the director's vision. This is one of those rare cases where the producers are the only people in the room who really deserve to have the vision, like
Yeah.
it's their movie. And it was awesome for them to give him the chance to direct. But at the same time, it was really something that happened because George couldn't do it. They weren't directors, they were producers. Russo's also a writer. Um, they just wanted to get their copyright back for their movie, and they wanted to do justice by the people who had worked on the original film. But that's why I also love this film so much. It's one of the rare examples where you actually have the original team coming back to remake their movie. Normally that doesn't happen in this industry.
No, it really doesn't. And I think it's really interesting to see the changes that were made that were more producer driven, and the chance to go back decades later and improve upon your work like that is not something we see in films.
Right. And not the lazy George Lucas way where you like update the effects and ruin scenes that fans of your series love.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
yeah. No,
this is legitimately like improving the script with a bigger budget and actually contemporizing it and making it make sense for the year that you're remaking it in.
right.
Yeah, so this is one of those rare chances where you get the people, because the first one is very low budget. This is like that was like their first time out. So this is the chance where, okay, you had a great idea. Now you have the money to actually do that great idea justice, and you have more experience under your belt. So it's just, for me, the remake wins hands down, because it's what the original should have been, if it could have been.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, interestingly enough, happy 30th anniversary. Uh, this film actually came out October 21st, 1990. So we're right upon the 30th anniversary. So I might have to watch it again.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's crazy too, because it still holds up really strong 30 years later.
Funny thing about that though is films like this in general aren't received very well by like critics. Usually horror films are grossly overlooked, so obviously there's no Oscars for this film. I was a little shocked to realize that it didn't win any awards. Like, I looked it up, and apparently it was nominated for 2 Saturn awards, obviously best horror film and best makeup, and it didn't win either one of those. So it has no real official awards. But there are definitely some technical achievements in this film that stuck with me. But when this came out, it came out right around Halloween, 1990. It had a budget of 4.2 million, and it only grossed 5.8 million. And opening weekend, it was like 2.9 million.
Mm-hmm.
So, moviegoers of the 1990s, what the fuck? What were you doing that like you couldn't go see an awesome zombie movie for Halloween? Like,
That's interesting.
I don't get
to
that.
think about, because
Yeah.
it's like that seems like the big thing to go to the theater for around Halloween is scary movies, and
Right.
the movies were so much bigger back then. It was like if you wanted to see a movie, you went to the movies. There was no way to
Yeah, there
watch
was
it
no
at
streaming.
home. Like yeah. That's definitely surprising.
But it definitely made its money back, and obviously with home box office and HBO actually, they're the ones who I think bought it, and it was playing on that all the time. So that's probably where we watched it. I think HBO was playing it all the time because
Yeah.
I do remember when I watched it, it was not edited, and HBO won't edit films.
Yes,
So
that's true. I do remember the gore,
because it's not TV, it's HBO.
the headshots, everything. Yep.
Yeah. So one of the technical achievements that stood out for me was something I'd never seen before. Is there's that very skinny zombie that comes through the window,
hmm
and he's shirtless and he gets shot in the chest. And this is a great moment. And I'll come back to this moment, but the effects for that are amazing. They had to get this really skinny actor
hmm
to be able to mold the zombie carcass body over with squibs in it, and he had to be so skinny that when they added all of these prosthetics, it didn't bulk him up so much where he looked unrealistic. So I've never seen anything like that in a film up to that point, and I haven't seen it in many films since then. But to have squibs going off on a shirtless person, to see a shirtless person being shot on camera is something that is almost never in any film.
No, it's not. And now that you're saying that, that's how they did that. I'm thinking of that moment, that guy standing in the window, and I remember thinking, "Wow, that guy is so skinny." And to think that he stayed looking that skinny while having that much stuff on him, that had to be really difficult. And I think knowing that Tom Savini had his hand in this film is people going to that length for their effects, going, above and beyond.
Yeah, I think if you look at the behind the scenes, obviously you can see it's a little thicker than it looks in the film, but that's where you got to know how to light your effects. You got to know where to position your camera and how to compose the shot and how to hide the things that you don't want the audience to see. And obviously Savini knows that before he ever sat in a director's chair. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why the effects sell so well. And going back to older movies like this, I mean, sometimes it can be hit or miss, but I do miss practicals a lot,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you don't have to worry about any bad CGI after you go back to a certain point in film history. Because there's a lot of films from the early 2000s, even the late 90s, that they just didn't age well because Hollywood was aggressively trying to use CGI, and it doesn't age well when it's new technology and you're barely having the processing power to really convince anyone that these things are photorealistic.
Yeah.
It was impressive at the time because we hadn't seen anything like it, but it's a far cry from being passable by today's standards. So when you go far back enough, you don't have to worry about that anymore,
Yeah.
and you get to see practical things on set that you believe.
And there's such an artistry to practical effects. I have a deep love for them because so much sweat and blood gets poured into them, just for hours and hours. Somebody working on something that may only get 10 seconds or less of screen time, and they would have spent like 6 hours on it. I think, just the amount of effort, the amount of willpower to work that hard on something,
Yeah.
just to sell
Oh,
it.
you've got stuff where they work on something for 6 months and it only gets, 5 seconds of screen time.
Definitely.
Sometimes it's the
Yeah.
Johnny dummy at the beginning in the cemetery that falls on the tombstone. It's so graphic. It's up, especially in HD. That dummy's on screen a little longer than it should be, but that impact is still so cringy. It's just like it looks so painful.
Yeah. Watching the neck break.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I'm normally good at spotting that stuff. Now that you're saying that it's a dummy, I need to go back and watch because I watched this film like at least twice before doing this podcast, and
Right.
I kept wondering how they did that. I was like, I know it can't actually be Bill Moseley, falling and breaking his neck because he was in House of a Thousand
Yeah.
Corpses a few years later, so clearly he didn't die for the
Right,
movie.
so he didn't die.
But I think it was a really incredibly great looking dummy.
Yeah, it's definitely not something notice the first few times you watch it for sure because it's done very well.
Yeah.
Of course, again, I've seen the film like 30 times, so going into it, even though I haven't seen it in a while, I know it's a dummy. I've seen it so many times. I just know that there's a dummy in that shot.
Yeah.
But I'm not looking for those things. It's just obviously you notice more and more and more. No matter how many times you watch a movie, you're gonna always notice more things. Even like when she's hitting the zombie in the house,
Hmm.
with the fire poker. I for the longest time I didn't realize that was a dummy she was hitting. Like I was like, man, it looks so real. Like because there's some shots where it's a rubber fire poker and they have the real zombie actor in there, but then they switch it with a real fire poker and she's whacking this thing as hard as she can and it looks very real. It's misdirection, like Savini says. He has you so focused on her and her actions and her swings, you start missing this thing is not really articulating like a normal human being. It's kind of like a little stiffer than normal
Right.
when they switch it out. And it took me forever to realize that that was a dummy. I didn't realize it for the longest time. Yeah. So if something works for the first 10 times you see a movie, it works. You know?
Oh, definitely. There's so many little things like that sprinkled throughout this film that really just make it special, make it hold up after 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, the scene where they're at the cemetery where she took the flowers out of the ground, the pokers, and she's smacking the zombie so many times with that poker and she gets her brother in the hand. And I'm thinking like
Yeah.
it's moving like a real person, like, but is it a spring-loaded thing or is that a dummy and it's actually going into it? I normally know these things and I can point them out pretty well. And in this film, I get tricked a lot and I'm surprised by it.
Yeah. Going back to the opening, Jesus Christ. Right out of the gate, the first jump scare still got me. Like I knew it was coming, and yet I still didn't know it was coming. I was expecting it, and still it came at a very unexpected moment. Like I actually
Hmm.
jumped. And what I'm talking about is when they misdirect you, and that's not really the first jump scare. It's just playing with you if you've seen the original. It's like, oh, he's not a zombie. He's just confused old man, and he's got a head wound, but they misdirect you again. You're looking at that guy as he's walking away, and then Johnny is perfectly like blocking the left side of frame,
Hmm.
and no one notices it till it's too late. But the real zombie comes out of nowhere, pushes him aside, and goes straight for Barbara.
Right.
And it happens so fast that
It does.
yeah, as you're reacting, it's already on top of her. It's just done so well.
It is.
They know what they're doing. It's crafted perfectly, and it doesn't get old. For me anyway, it never gets old.
Fair enough. But, thinking about that, the confused old man who's the misdirect, I think it's so interesting that he walks up to them and he says that he's sorry and he has that cut on your head and you're kind of confused at first. And looking back, and I wonder, is it like, does he already know that the zombies are there and he's not going to tell them, hoping that they'll be there as bait so he could get away?
Oh yeah, there's a lot going on there.
And to tell them that he's sorry
I think
while he's essentially killing them, I thought was really interesting.
yeah, I think he's just dazed and confused. I mean, I think he's in shock. Honestly, I don't think he has any malicious intent. I really think he's just in shock. Whatever just happened to him, he's still processing it.
That's true because we see Barbara in that state later.
Yeah, I mean, how would you react, right?
Yeah.
But the cemetery is a good example of daylight horror.
Yes, it is.
There were supposed to be storm clouds, and they were going to have this very moody scene, like with overcast, and it was going to be very spooky. But of course, the film gods said no, and that weathered pattern didn't happen that day. They had a clear, bright sky, and they had to shoot anyway. But because the effects stand up, it works. You're immediately confronted with the enemy, and they don't pull any punches.
Yeah.
Thank God the effects stand up. They're done so well that you can film it in daylight, and it just makes it more horrifying because you can see every detail.
Exactly.
They don't have to hide it.
I think it actually worked in their favor because it turns the world upside down. Because in horror movies, people rely so much on the dark to make things scary. To have something that scary happening in broad daylight just goes to show like this will happen anywhere at any time.
Yeah, you're not safe.
And I think that makes it more terrifying. Even on the most beautiful day, the most gruesome thing imaginable is happening.
The cinematography in this film is amazing. I mean, you have that daylight scene and the effects make it work. But then once you get to the house and then they actually get into a controlled setup, I mean, it's beautiful. Like there's enough light where you still see details, key things that you need to see, but then there's so much of it that's just drowning in black darkness where
Yes.
you're not sure what's in that corner. So they play with both angles, where it's like I can clearly see what I can clearly see, but there's just enough that I'm not sure about.
Right.
Something could be there, something could be around that corner, and that it's still broad daylight outside, so you have that sunlight coming in that should make you feel warm and safe, but they just cast larger shadows in certain areas in the house, and it brings that spooky atmosphere even though you're still in the middle of the day.
It creates a disorienting feel to have the contrast between the light, between the shadow, the eyes adjusting. Are your eyes playing tricks on you as they're adjusting from going from, the shadowy corner of the house to the lighter part of the house? And,
Right.
definitely, it plays with the mind a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And as simple as it looks, I can tell it's not simple setups. It's there's a lot of work that goes into that. And I really love it. It almost has a noir look to it because there are some very harsh shadows on like covering half of a character's face sometimes,
Yes.
while the other half has like a very strong key light on it. And it's a striking image. But and then the performances are amazing. I mean, maybe not the supporting cast. They're okay.
Yeah.
But the leads, I
Leads.
guess you could
And
say.
I think Bill Moseley, even though he's only in the first 5 minutes, before he breaks his neck on the headstone, the way he acts so creepy with his sister, I'm coming to get you, Barbara.
Right.
He establishes that there's so much life within him, being that older brother who messes with his sister, but also while he's doing that, establishing that spooky attitude, there's just so much character development. He shows himself having so much humanity in just those few minutes that he's there that it's so tragic when he dies.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing that maybe I'll come back to this things I would do differently, but it's good to know that like yeah, he's messing with his older sister. He kind of seems like a dick, but when the shit hits the fan, he really does try to save her. Like that's what's so tragic about his demise is that he was really trying to save the day and he was willing to sacrifice himself because he threw himself on this attacker to save his sister without hesitation.
Yeah, no hesitation at all.
So it sucks that he dies obviously and so quickly. He's a good example of like a small like there are no small roles, only small actors. So he really makes what that role is. He shines in it and makes it more than it could have been.
Yes.
It could have been very forgettable. Um, when they get into the house, I'm not super keen on the the family member who lives there and the his girlfriend. I can't even remember their names. They're really not that important. When it comes to uh Tony Todd, Tom Towles and Patricia Tallman, they're the holy trinity of this film. Their performances are home runs for me.
Right.
And I mean, especially when Tony Todd shows up, it is the most badass.
Yes, I'm glad we're getting to this
it's
part.
the most badass zombie movie entrance like I think I've ever seen in any movie. Like he just so he runs over a zombie, hops out a truck, smoking a cigarette with a crowbar, and it's just like no nonsense immediately. He's like, come on!
Yeah.
And he's like judo kicks a zombie.
Yes, he judo kicks a
just like-
zombie, and it is just,
Yes!
it's
yes!
so good.
He's not having it.
It's you're just like,
He's not having it.
you get this feeling inside you, and you're like, yeah, like,
Yeah, immediately. He judo kicks a zombie. He fucking grabs a frying pan over the head.
Yeah.
Drags that son of a bitch outside and immediately takes over this house. He's just like, this is my house now.
Yeah.
Where it's
Yeah.
safe.
and you're like, he did not come to fuck around.
You're like, man, what is this chick gonna even do? She's so ill prepared. And then this dude shows up and you're like, oh, she's fine.
Yeah.
She's gonna be fine.
And I think what's so great about Tony Todd's performance and the character Ben is that he does all that, but then you see his softer side too after he's with Barbara for a little bit and he's trying to get her to come out of that shell shock and
Oh yeah.
and he hugs her to let her know everything's okay
Yeah.
and you just see that he's just so all around such a good person. Like he just met her and he's there for her and and he's killing zombies and he's everything a hero should be.
Yeah, and he's not patronizing either.
No.
He's like telling her, you've got to fight, basically. He's like, the shit hit the fan and it's time to deal with it. And because in the original, Barbara never comes out of that catatonic state.
Right.
She's stuck in that for the entire film, and that's all you get out of her. No strong female lead whatsoever, especially in that time period. That's one of the things that's so great about this film is they went in a different direction. They talk about Alien and like the whole Ripley situation, and it was very, I guess it was very much in the political climate at the time, which I don't know why it's in the political climate again, because it seems like people just haven't been watching movies as much as me, because I've been seeing a lot of strong female characters my entire life. But I can harken it back to this particular period where it started.
Yeah.
It's like 88, 90 onwards is where you get these really awesome, badass chicks in movies.
Yeah.
And I've always loved it when it's believable. I've seen bad movies, obviously. You can make a bad movie starring anyone. But I've seen movies where it's not believable, whether it's a man or a woman, and you're just not invested. But when it's done right, I'm all on board. And this is one of those movies where it's done right because you get to see her deal with this in real time and process and become a badass.
Right.
She doesn't just show up like, I've always kicked ass, I'm a badass. You know? It's like she gets strong, she becomes strong. And it's the same thing with Ripley and Alien. And obviously with Tony Todd's character, he shows up a badass, but like you said, when he softens up and he tells more, there's very powerful dialogue where he actually, you get into his backstory and he talks about what happened at the diner and you know, being overtaken by zombies. So he already went through his catatonic state. It just happened somewhere earlier for him in the timeline, you know? So by the time he shows up at the house, he's been dealing with zombies.
Right.
So, you know, so it's believable. You just meet him later in his journey. I know like one of the very powerful things he talks about when he saw people loading them up 10, 20 in a truck, like they know what they're going to do with them. And he says that, you know, they open it up to let one more in and they all come spilling out like insects. And he's just, you can see it like in his expression. He's really reliving it. And that's where you can see like how he's processing the horrific nature of what he's witnessed. It's almost like he didn't have time to do it then.
Yeah, no, he was too busy surviving.
Yeah. There's this wasn't a big budget movie. 4.2 million seems like a lot, but especially for this time period, that is not a lot of money to make a movie. So obviously there was no money left over for scoring the film. That's why it's really outdated synth. All done by one guy. That's the one thing that probably, well, I don't want to say it hasn't aged well because synth scores are very much in vogue again. So it kind of came full circle, I guess. But it doesn't sound like the current synth scores. It still sounds pretty dated from like something left over from the 80s. It's weird. It's weird. I don't want to say it's like a downside to it, but it's not what you'd be expecting from a film like this. It's not how you expect a film like this to sound.
Yeah.
I think you'd expect more tonal, eerie, ominous sounds to be coming in the background or something. And it's just kind of like dum 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 ding do dum dum, and you're just like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing. You got them new synth scores for us, Gary? And it's like, I'm one more, hang on.
I like them, but in a sense, it's because it brings me back to a different time when I watch it.
Yeah, nostalgia.
To a time when a lot of horror movies had that sound. So to me, I make that special connection, but I could see how, you know, somebody who's not in our age group, who didn't grow up with these movies, would just not get it, and how it could completely take them out of the film.
Yeah, it didn't take me out, but, you know, I was definitely aware of it. That's the one thing that's kind of different as opposed to anything else you'd be watching from today, or even at that time period, they weren't doing that still. It's just because they didn't have the budget, they kind of went in that direction.
Yeah.
And Romero was used to doing that, so I felt like he was comfortable with it.
But once they get into that house, we haven't touched on that, and it was something I wanted to talk about. I think it's very interesting how Cooper is the exact opposite of Ben, and how you see how Ben kills all those zombies, he comforts Barbara.
Yeah.
You know, he does so much for the group. It's essentially we're watching somebody who is selfless versus somebody who is selfish.
Right.
And I think that internal battle between selfishness and selflessness gets really interesting inside that house.
Oh, definitely.
It's interesting how much selfishness can win up to a point in this movie.
Right. Well, because when you're looking out for number one, there's a lot of variables that you don't have to take into account.
Right.
So if you're just going to lock yourself in the cellar, you don't have to worry about boarding up the windows or where you're going to get the wood to do that, you know?
Yeah.
And it's funny because Jesus Christ, Cooper, as much of a dick as he is, it sucks because he's kind of right the whole time, actually, because as they show you, boarding up the windows is what attracts all those zombies to the house.
Yeah.
They establish that one zombie walking into the foreground. It's a nice shot with the house in the background, and she just stops. She hears the banging and turns towards the house and goes. And that just tells you everything you need to know right there. They're attracted
It
to
is.
sound.
Fun tidbit, that woman was actually the homeowner of the house and she wanted a cameo in the movie.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, I was going to say
Oh, okay.
that. It's funny. I mean, like, it's like, sure, why not? Why not? I'll be a zombie in front of my house.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, that is true. And it's interesting to point that out that, you know, as much of a dick Cooper was, I guess he was right about that. As much as I want Ben to, you know, be right 100% of the time just because he's the hero.
Yeah.
You know, I think in the end a bit, if you let me jump there, if you don't think it's too soon.
No, go ahead. Yeah, there's no fucking time is irrelevant.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because in the end, Cooper lived because he went up to the attic while Ben dies in the basement.
Right.
I think there's a lot of symbolism in that. So even though, you know, Ben's actions drew the zombies to the house, in the end, I feel like even though he's dead, he still has the last laugh, especially, you know, with Barbara killing Cooper, you know, for being such a dick and shooting Ben and causing Ben's death.
Oh,
But
yeah, definitely. And it goes down the way it goes down because of the conflict that bubbles up. The tensions have been rising the entire time in that house, and they get to a boiling point, and then
Yeah.
everybody starts popping off.
Well, the last straw
You know?
was the daughter because Cooper just couldn't get a handle on the situation. He couldn't
Oh, yeah.
face the reality that was in front of him that, you know, this is happening. Your daughter is not your daughter anymore. And, you know, when Ben tries to save them from having a zombie within the house, you know, Cooper just rather shoot a living human being who's still a human being than kill his own daughter. Because, you know, his daughter is almost an extension of himself. You know, that's how selfish he is, in my eyes at least.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, as much as Cooper is a dick, he has one of my favorite lines in the movie, which is, "You bunch of yo-yos."
He sells that really well, yeah.
I've never heard that in anything ever in my life except for this film. He says it about 3 times, and I used to call everyone yo-yos when I was a child because of it.
He's so grumbly about it too. He's like, "Ah, you bunch of yo-yos."
Yeah.
Like,
And then he's like, "Yeah, bunch of yo-yos." And he's so angry.
we got to bring that back.
That's one of my favorite lines in the whole movie. But yeah, so he's not a good guy, but obviously cares about his daughter who's sick. He's trying to take care of her. Apparently doesn't care about his wife at all. He's really sick of that bitch.
No.
Like, he's
Yeah.
just not having any of her shit. He was like, "I didn't even want to go to this thing tonight. You dragged me out here. That's why she got bit." Like,
Right. Well, what I thought was interesting, they are dressed really nice, right? And
Yeah.
I was almost wondering if they kind of lied about their backstory and if they had maybe been attending a funeral. And that's how the daughter got bit.
that would be interesting.
I don't know, because you don't get much of their backstory. And I that was just something I was speculating on.
Yeah, you don't know exactly where they were going or where they were coming from, but yeah, obviously it was something fancy.
Yeah, they claim that their car broke down on the interstate or highway, something like that.
Right. But there's a lot of great character moments. I mean, I guess earlier in the film, or well, this is later than what we were just talking about, but earlier than the ending. I mean, I call it Barbara's Kia moment, which is basically when she just like starts kicking ass. But it's when she's shooting the skinny guy, actually. So
Yeah.
there's a skinny zombie coming through the window, and she just starts like, because everyone's still not processing that these are zombies. These are dead people that are walking. People are like, that doesn't make sense. That's not real.
Mhm.
And then she just starts pumping bullets in this thing's chest. Like, is it dead yet? Is it dead yet?
I love that moment so much.
It's great because it's finally like she's full commando mode at this point. And then even Ben's trying to act like he's commando still and he's the hero. And he's like, hey, you're losing it. Chill out, relax. And she's like, oh, you think I'm losing it. You think I'm losing it. And she just rails into everybody. Like, you can talk to me about losing it when you all stop screaming at each other like a bunch of 2-year-olds. And the way she sells that line as like, it's perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Miss Tallman knocks that out of the park for me. And then she just headshots the zombie. Like, by the way, I'm a marksman. Like,
Yeah, no, that was just great for so many different reasons. I just watching her break out of her shell, watching that sort of character transformation is such a win. And then just watching her just make everybody else in that house look like such an asshole was great. Because you're getting so irritated by them by that point in the film.
Exactly.
Because they just can't get their shit together. I mean, with the exception of Ben. You know, that blonde chick who just keeps wailing.
Well, Ben's at odds, though.
Huh?
I wouldn't even say Ben has his shit together because he's trying, but he's very much at odds with anyone who isn't doing exactly what he thinks is best. And that's not cooperative behavior.
You know, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
I try to be very zen with people. And if I was in that situation, I wouldn't be challenging everything that someone said. I'd be trying to get them to understand what I need them to understand so that we can work together.
Yeah.
Right? So you want to stay in the basement, that's fine, man. Let's come up with a plan where everybody's safe. Like, so if you want to hold down the cellar and take care of your daughter, I'm going to do what I can up here to make sure that zombies can't get into the house in the first place. So I'm our first line of defense.
Right.
I'm doing that for everybody, right? I will try to make them understand that. I'm going to try my best to make sure that they can't even get into the house in the first place. If that doesn't work, we need to work together and I need to go down there because that's our last resort.
Yeah.
I feel like someone would understand that. Like, okay, you're going to be up here trying to make sure that we're safe. You're helping me protect my family. You're not trying to get my family killed, you know?
Yeah.
And that's easier said than done sometimes,
Definitely.
but that's an approach to take.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, fuck you. The cellar's a death trap, you fucking idiot. Like, Of course, movies are conflict, so obviously I would ruin movies if I were in them.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, I mean, they could have just turned off all the lights and stayed real quiet, and zombies probably wouldn't have walked up to the house, you know? I mean, boom, movie's over.
Yeah.
Like,
that's not a very interesting movie, so.
Let's go hide in the attic, turn off all the lights, make sure there's absolutely, you know, no sound, nothing to draw 'em in, you know, I mean.
But that's just to my point of, like, he's not perfect. He's doing things in, he's not being selfish, but he is sort of being egotistical.
Okay. Yeah, I could see it like that, and everybody has character flaws, yeah.
I mean, look, it's Tony Todd. If anyone deserves an ego in this movie, I mean, he single-handedly is beating the shit out of zombies on the porch with a torch, and it's awesome. And that rhymes. I didn't mean it to, but it did, and we can't take it back. Oh my God, when the first time I saw that scene, I was so worried that he was gonna die on the porch. There were just so many zombies. It was so hopeless. He gets left behind, and you're just like, well, he doesn't have a gun. He's lost his torch. And then he just starts tackling zombies and punching zombies on his way back to the house.
I thought that was the best because it showed that you could do something without needing a weapon still. And he could still be a badass just all by himself, just with his own body.
He's just, oh my God. He's just sweeping legs and punching zombies in the face. And he's just, until he gets all the way back to the house and gets back inside. And you're just like, what's going to stop this guy then? I mean, and obviously a dick with a gun who shoots him. But, you know, no one can outrun bullets. But
And talk about stupid, though. To go back to that gas station scene, I mean, this useless blonde girl who's just been obnoxious the whole movie, like, just can't hear anything. She's just like, why is she the one driving? Jeez, okay.
Because her dad owns trucks.
They're like, we lost him. And she's like, should we go back? Or, you know, I mean, she's just so lost. And then the other guy's panicking because I would be panicking too, just because she's so much of a head case. She's even hard to be around. He's like, let me just shoot the lock off this gasoline.
Oh God. That's definitely something I would fix in my version. Oh God.
Yeah. So that's something you would fix?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess let's get into some of the changes. But I mean, before we do that, I want to go over some behind the scenes type stuff. We covered some things, but well, and then some of this stuff is things people may not know. So Romero, he invented the modern idea of zombies, basically. A lot of people don't realize where our idea of The Walking Dead comes from. And it's very much Romero and Russo and their original inception of the idea
Hmm.
of Night of the Living Dead, the 68 version.
Yeah.
We touched over a little bit, but basically what happened with the original, there was a big infamous copyright debacle where the original title was Night of the Flesh Eaters, and there was already a film called The Flesh Eaters. So the distributor told them they should change the title. Romero agreed. They changed the title to Night of the Living Dead. And somebody in the office who was distributing the film screwed up and didn't include the copyright onto the new film with the new titles.
Hmm.
So they basically cut the frames that had the copyright claim on it. They didn't find out until years later that it was being screened and treated as public domain, and it became a very big battle for them to get the copyright back. And to this day, they still have not reclaimed the copyright to the original Night of the Living Dead 68 version.
Tragedy.
I mean, yes and no, I guess, because it led to the remake, which I love so much more.
That's true.
It is what it is. I mean,
It's kind of weird how, little mistakes cascade into these things.
yeah, okay. And then another little fun tidbit, Tom Savini almost did the effects for the original Night of the Living Dead, actually.
Really?
Yeah, he was chasing Romero around, showing him his portfolio of work, and Romero was like, "Oh, we could definitely use you." The only reason he wasn't able to was because he went to Vietnam. Like, he
Wow.
was a combat photographer. Yeah,
Wow.
so he ended up going to Nam instead of doing the effects for Night of the Living
I
Dead.
did not know that, and I didn't realize that Tom Savini was that old. And I did not know that he was a veteran. Hats off to that. That's really impressive.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, you don't have to be that old to go to war. I mean, he could have been 18, 19.
Yeah, sad. Yeah.
I saw the pictures. He didn't look like he was older than 25, honestly.
Okay, that adds up.
This is so funny. I never realized this. It's just funny. He's a funny character, and I always knew there was something special about him. I found out in the behind the scenes this time around. Do you know that guy at the end of the movie who's wearing an eye patch? Who's like he's just like talking to the news, and he just sounds so dumb. He's just like, "Oh, they're dead. Yeah, they're all messed up." And it's just like, that guy is the actor who played the original Johnny.
Oh, that's great that they included him in this. I like that.
I know, it's just a little Johnny cameo, OG Johnny.
I did not know that.
And then here's a little note about. So you had mentioned about Savini saying only like 40% of his ideas got into the film.
Yeah.
And you know what? I gotta say that's probably for good reason, because what he, what he originally wanted to do, he wanted to start the film in black and white, and then he wanted to transition to a sepia tone
Oh,
before going into full color.
yeah, no. That's a bad idea.
Yeah.
I don't know what the symbolism in that would have been.
He wanted to, the way he says it in the commentary was, the first part makes sense, black and white. He said he wanted to ease the audience into the remake. So for the original fans, it starts like black and white, like the original, and then he would ease you into color. But to go from black and white into a sepia tone makes no sense whatsoever. In fact, I would argue that the sepia tone is a look that's even further back than black and white. I mean, when you see sepia, you immediately think of like the 1930s and 20s. That's like one of the first film emulsion looks, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like you're going backwards in time with the look of the film before jumping into color. And I just don't see how that would have worked.
It doesn't add anything to the film. If anything, it would just confuse the audience. It would take them out of the movie.
Yeah.
I think there's only one movie that could truly pull doing that off. It's called The Wizard of Oz. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, right. Like, I would give him the benefit of the doubt if he said he wanted to go from black and white to color and like slowly introduce color. But that sepia tone in the middle, no, that's not gonna work,
Yeah.
man.
Big X canceled.
It's his directorial debut. He didn't know any better. Thank God the producers knew better and said, no, we're not doing
Well,
that.
that's why you have producers on a film, because even though somebody could be brilliant and have a lot of good ideas, even the best of us have some bad ideas sometimes.
Definitely. I mean, especially if you own the original property.
Yeah.
So, okay, I guess now we can get into the changes I would make because this podcast is the films I wish I made.
Hmm.
God help me. If I could remake this film one day, I really will. I'm still like, it's possible, right? It's been 30 years. It's due, maybe. I think here's the thing. If I remade this film, I would be remaking the 90 version. I would not be remaking the 68 version. I would be starting from all the liberties they took with the 90 version.
Okay.
And I think I would keep a lot of things very similar. I would definitely shoot it differently. I like to move my camera around a lot more. Not that this one doesn't have camera movement, but I like to move it in more interesting ways that reveal things slowly, gradually. They had some movement up into a point and then they would just cut.
Yeah. Yeah, they do that.
But so yeah, here's I guess in no particular order because these are just things that came to me as I was watching it. Like they're sort of random. One thing for me, going back to Tommy, that dumb son of a bitch. I don't believe Tommy is dumb enough to shoot a gas tank. I really don't. I don't feel like they made him that dumb of a character. It always pissed me off when he does that. You could fix it by maybe just the simplest way would be to make him seem dumber, to actually make him like, oh, this is a stupid guy.
Yeah.
I wish I would want to do better by that character and maybe have that explosion happen differently. Like maybe it's a sacrifice and maybe they've already got his girl and he's about to get eaten alive and they're going for Ben or something like that. And then maybe he decides to shoot the gas tank because they don't have the right keys anyway.
That would have been a lot stronger.
Yeah, I feel like, and honestly, blowing yourself up to kill a horde of zombies is a bit cliche at this point in zombie movies.
Yeah.
But I still feel like that's better than I'm a fucking idiot, so I shot a gas tank and not realizing.
Especially because that kid kind of is wearing like a hunting-esque getup. Clearly, the guy's a hunter. It actually costs a lot of money to mount deer heads and stuff. So, if that's their house and he grew up with gun knowledge and gun safety, this is how you handle guns when we're killing things, he wouldn't have shot up a gas tank.
Yeah, not to say that you're not right about that, but technically it's his uncle's house. But obviously, I'm sure his house is very similar.
Right, yeah.
It's a very Hollywood liberal idea of a hick to do something like that.
Yeah.
Because the liberal writing that has no idea how guns work to the level of a gun owner.
Yeah.
A gun owner would not do that. A gun owner, they go hunting, they go to the range, and they play with their guns. So they know how to use their guns.
Yeah.
And they know gun safety, and they know what guns are capable of. It just shows you what you don't know as a person who doesn't use guns.
Yeah.
And when I write something, I try to get into that character space. Like what kind of knowledge do they have? What do they know?
Right.
Do they know things that I don't know?
Yeah.
And then I have to do research on those things because how am I going to write about it if I don't know anything about it? The next thing I would do is make Cooper more sympathetic. I would make it very much more about him being torn between doing the right thing and protecting his sick daughter and family. I would definitely tone it down with him being an asshole to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally fine with him still getting into it with Ben at that level.
Right.
But then I want to see him go downstairs and hold his sick daughter's hand and kiss her and tell her she's going to be all right and be this loving father. I want to see the juxtaposition of this person who can be this evil asshole upstairs with this other guy because they're both alphas or betas that are barking at each other, and then explore his tender side where you realize this is a human being, this is a father, this is a husband.
Yeah.
He just wants his family to get out of this alive.
That would certainly be a lot more tragic, and that would definitely add a lot more depth to the film had his character had more depth instead of his character seeming like he's just there simply to be an obstacle to Ben.
Exactly. That's where I would approach it from. And then I would like to have it obvious that Ben knows that the girl is going to turn. Maybe a bit of dialogue or something, but Ben tell Barbara at some point, it's like, I saw someone get bit by one of those things, and tell her what happens. Like, he didn't last long. And before long, he was one of them. We got to do something about this. And then that's a whole new source of conflict. It's not just a surprise at the end of like, oh, she's a zombie now. Like, because we all know at this point she's going to turn into a zombie as an audience. To know that someone else in that house knows that adds to the tension,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
No, that would.
I don't think I would have them break the TV either. I would want to use that in the denouement. When Ben's in the basement listening to the radio, I would have that be the TV instead. I just feel like that keeps it more updated. I mean, who's really listening to the radio anymore?
Mhm.
And I feel like you could get a better visual with him, like, actually having a TV set up down there. Um, and the whole idea of you not getting reception in the basement doesn't really even make sense anymore because obviously we have digital TVs now. So, and also the TV works as a practical light too. It would be illuminating the basement.
All right.
I think I would want to spend more time with Ben. I would open the film with maybe a visually striking montage of the things that Ben describes later on in the film.
Like as he's talking about them, cut to that.
No, I would like think of like an opening credit sequence. A lot of stuff in high frame rate, slow motion. When he describes he saw the zombies spill out, I would actually have that shot in the beginning opening credits.
Okay.
I would have my credits appearing over that diner being taken over by zombies. When he talks about the guy with an assault rifle spraying into the diner and one of the zombies getting hit a bunch of times and not dropping until it gets hit in the head. I wouldn't overly explain these things. It's just a little bit more show, don't tell.
Mhm.
So I would just kind of push in on those key moments and like him observing how he gets all this knowledge. And I wouldn't spend too much time on these things because I still want similar dialogue later on when he actually describes the horror of it to Barbara.
Right.
But then at that point, you would kind of recall those shots and be like, oh, I actually have something. And I only saw a little bit of it. Now he's describing it in more detail. And because I just have that little bit to go off of, now my imagination can run with whatever he's saying now. Because he has such a cool story. I just want to like see a little bit more of him before he gets to the house.
Right.
And then I would go to the cemetery with Barbara and Johnny.
Okay.
Yeah. I think obviously I would update the action. Like the shootout between Ben and Cooper, I would do that a little bit more streamlined. It's very stop and go because it's very clear. It's like, oh, I've been shot in the stomach and now I fall back. You try to shoot her, but I shoot at you. Now I shot you in the stomach. Now you run up to the stairs. Now I run to the bottom of the stairs. Now I try to shoot you again, but you shoot at me and then I get shot in the arm. It's too much. It's boring as I describe it to you. I would have that happen a lot quicker.
Okay.
And have the audience have to catch up with what just happened.
Right.
What else? I would make it more moody, especially when Barbara is walking away from the house at the end when she's like, "Oh, we can just walk around them." I would have like her look back at the house and see like a swarm of zombies taking over, just flooding into it. And just kind of have it be like a really moody, dark moment for her to see how far she's come as a character, but then also to see how hopeless that situation was and to like take in the fact that she's outside of it.
Right.
She made it out.
I think that would have been quite a bit stronger. I do think it needed a little bit more punch right there at the end with that, and I think that would have helped.
Yeah, and knowing Ben is still inside makes it even more
heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong, it's a great scene when there's that zombie with the doll and she shoots it and just that way she delivers that line. It's like, oh God, like it's a lot. And I would maybe have something similar to that, but still a bit more gravitas in terms of what's happening to the house behind her.
Yeah. I did like the zombie doll. Something similar should be kept.
Oh, that brings me to another change. Instead of that zombie doll there, I would actually have that be Johnny as a zombie.
I thought that I read in trivia about this movie that they were thinking of bringing either Johnny or her mom back, like for some sort of emotional punch.
Yeah, I saw that too. Like she hallucinates her mother at one point. That's what they were thinking of doing. That's why she hesitates to shoot a zombie. They ended up not using that. I only noticed because of the commentary this time around, but actually when she jumps into the truck with all the dead bodies at the end, when those Hicks shoot at her, mistaking her for a zombie, the second dead body you see is actually Johnny. It's the dummy Johnny that they used to break the neck.
Oh, that was so quick. I didn't catch that.
I know, but that's why she's so freaked out because she's on top of her dead brother.
That's awful. I did not catch that.
Yeah, it sucks. I don't think it sells very powerfully because she's very quickly like fine after it. Like after she gets out of the truck, she's like, oh, I'm safe now. It's fine. Like that's your brother. Like you were just laying on top of your dead brother.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a nice little Easter egg. I feel like they didn't script it necessarily. I feel like they just threw it in there. So
That's possible, yeah.
yeah, I would definitely make it a bigger moment like that instead of that doll holding a zombie.
Yeah.
I feel like it'd be more powerful if she ran into her brother, which is a bit of an homage to the original because her brother does bash through the front door and come in, and that's when that the original Barbara dies because she's almost starting to come out of this catatonic state, but she sees that and she just relapses and she just gets basically eaten by her brother.
Yeah.
So I feel like it'd be more powerful, but obviously in the contemporary situation where you have Barbara become a badass, she releases her brother from that curse.
Yeah.
You know, but the weight of that is there. And then when Ben has to kill the mother in the basement when he's locked down there,
Right.
I would actually do another homage to the original and when he points the gun at her, I would have him be out of bullets. So he backs away, kind of like, oh no, what am I going to do?
Mhm.
Have him hit the wall and then find that little garden shovel hanging on the wall and have to kill her with that. Because that's how she died in the original. Her daughter turns into a zombie, but grabs that and starts stabbing her.
Yes.
And so I thought that would just be a cool homage to the original that he has to stab her with that little gardening tool.
That actually would be. I like paying homage to the original content because even though we really like this remake, there were really great moments in the original. And I think
Definitely.
to highlight those and pay tribute to those, I think it would definitely be fascinating. And also it's hard to be in a house. And even though he didn't have much contact with the mother to, instead of just quick and clean with a bullet, to instead have to stab her with a gardening shovel. That's just so much more emotional, so
Yeah.
much more trauma than it needs to be.
Exactly. It's a very dark moment. And then from there, I would have him sit in that chair with the TV, his hand bloody, drop the shovel in front of him, smoke his last cigarette. And that's basically where he loses his shit. He's the new Barbara because he's just been through so much only to wind up in this situation where he's lost all hope. So not that he goes catatonic, but he's definitely beyond saving at that point.
He knows it's the end, yeah.
Cut to black there and maybe pick up with Barbara walking during like the sunrise. And I would kind of tease the audience here where she just looks like a zombie
Mhm.
and she's just like walking like a zombie. But really it would just be she's been walking all night. She's tired and like,
Okay.
about to pass out.
Digging that.
Yeah, it'd just be a nice little transition of like, oh no, they got her. Now she's one of them. But then come around and reveal that she's still being a badass and she's just marching forward. And I don't know. I feel like I could just end it there. I don't know if I need to like go back to the house like they do in the 90 version. I feel like we all know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
She got away. Cooper, I feel like I would probably have him die in that shootout.
That'd be interesting. Like, yeah, they both slowly die from their wounds from the shootout, or Cooper would have been dead instantly.
I think if anything, maybe I'd have him get pushed into the zombies coming into the house or something like that, like
Okay.
like he deserves that fate, because of what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he doesn't even get shot, and that's what sucks about it. He shoots everybody else. They shoot at him, but he doesn't get hit. Maybe even he could like go out on the roof or something and then fall off into the zombies. So it's his own fucking fault,
That could be interesting.
I think I would go more in that direction because once the horde takes over that house and Barbara leaves, the movie's over at that point. Everything else after that is like Romero saying, by the way, this is the message. They are us and we are them and we're no better. And it's like, yeah, but you spent the entire movie showing me that. And I got it. I watched the movie. I get your message. Just the way he puts it at the end in that little camp and everything. It's just like for the slow people
Yeah.
that don't understand what the movie's about and our humanity or lack thereof. So I don't feel like it's necessary to go back to the house.
Well, what's interesting with that ending is that I get a lot of Dawn of the Dead vibes from those few minutes that you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's the same because it's the same message. It's the same idea.
Yeah.
So that's in a nutshell what I would do differently. Obviously, my vision and my directorial style would play a significant role in how I would do those things. But those are just some like basic story changes I would want to make or character changes I would want to make.
Right.
And yeah, Night of the Living Dead, 1990.
Great film. Tony Todd kicking ass.
This is a film I wish I made. And I guess that concludes the first episode. I feel good about it. How do you feel, Hayley?
I feel good. Shit, I kind of wish I made that movie too.
I mean, it's a great movie.
You direct it, I produce it. I think that'd be a good combo.
All right, we could write it together.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, all right, guys. I hope you enjoyed the first episode. Our next episode is going to be Jeepers Creepers. It's Hayley's pick.
Oh, yeah.
Stay tuned, subscribe, comment, like, do all that stuff that helps us with the algorithms. And we'll see you next time, you bunch of yo-yos.
You just had to.
Bye. The Films I Wish I Made is a Daakins production. Daakins Productions is a multimedia company that does more than just make content. We also make original art, such as comics and movies. But only with your support can we consistently thrive in the online arena of entertainment. Check out our Ko-fi page where you can access premium and exclusive content for the right price. Until next time.
Should I cut?